I'm so excited that we have four of our winners with us on today from New York to California, all across the United States. First up, we've got Simran Gupta, our best middle school essay winner. Simran is 14 years old and is from Georgia. She plays the clarinet in her school band, as well as competing locally in both STEM and writing competitions. Simran, I played the clarinet in my school band, so we have something in common. Now, we've also got Margaret Alvine, our best high school essay winner, is 18 years old and lives in the Mojave Desert in California. Margaret is passionate about the Constitution, reading the works of Justice Scalia in her free time. She competes in speech and debate and teaches religious education at her parish. Now, we also have Magda Smith, our best college speech winner, 19 years old, from Ithaca, New York. She's currently a sophomore at Cornell University and enjoys writing songs in her free time. We are so excited to have you. And finally, we have Jacob Mott, winner of Best High School Essay on Film. Jacob is 18 and just started college in his home state, New York. So we want to first hear from Simran, who's going to read a passage from her winning essay.
Some of the most outstanding leaders of the free colonies drafted the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention on May 25, 1787. The 55 delegates in attendance came from a wide variety of backgrounds and interests, prolonging but also foolproofing the creation of the federal government and its checks and balances. However satisfied the framers were with the Constitution, a big contributing factor to as why the Constitution is still effective today is the equilibrium present between the three branches. It prevents tyranny and corruption. Just the functioning of one branch reins in the power of the others. This maintains the power of parity and the power of the people. The legislative branch, or Congress, is split into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The legislative branch's job is to draft and pass laws. Congress also accepts or rejects presidential nominations for federal agencies, federal judges, and the Supreme Court. In addition to this, Congress may dismiss a president's veto of a bill with a 2/3 vote, impeach and remove the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States, according to Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, and declare war. The executive branch is responsible for carrying out the law. Those involved in the executive branch include the president and his cabinet, the vice president, and most federal agencies. The president acts as head of government and leads the armed forces as commander-in-chief. He or she may give executive orders when unsatisfied with Congress's efforts or a court ruling. Nevertheless, most likely, the president's orders will be challenged by other parties. The president may also grant pardons under certain conditions. Because the president has so much responsibility and power, the cabinet and vice president offer their assistance. If the president passes away, the list of successors begins with the vice president and continues down the line of elected officials.
Well, Simran, that is great. There is so much knowledge packed into what you just read. Tell us, where do you get your ideas? And where can other people your age start to get inspired to write essays like yours?
I get my ideas from topics that I find interesting and areas where I see that something's lacking and want to find a way to improve it. My essay that I just read out loud is a great example of that. It talks about the branches of government and the checks and balances in our government. And I'm really interested in the history of the United States and our government and similar topics. So that really helped me in planning out my essay and really writing it. Another more recent example where I got an idea from a topic that I find interesting is the history club that I started at my high school. Basically, I was looking to join clubs that matched my interests, and I noticed that there wasn't anything that focused on teaching students about history or the government or preparing us to exercise our responsibilities as adults. And obviously, these are really important. That's what we're focusing on today in Constitution Day. And so the rest is history. I started a history club at my school and have connected a bunch of students that are just as interested as I am in history, and we're going strong. I even got the good news today that I was accepted in the State Superintendent of Schools Student Advisory Council, and That's here in Georgia. And basically, I noticed that middle school, the transition from middle school to high school for students wasn't as great as it could be. And that's what I wrote about in my application. I found a problem that I found an area that I thought was lacking, and I wrote about solutions that I thought could improve it. And for people who want to get inspired to write essays like mine, I think they can start by figuring out what interests them and becoming more aware about their surroundings. I think once you do that, it's so much easier to find inspiration. And personally, I think once a topic grabs my attention, it's a lot easier for me to create and develop ideas than if I'm forcing myself to write about something that I'm not interested in.
Oh, I can definitely. And it's so impressive to me how you see a problem and you jump right in and fix it. And that's kind of what we were talking about in the last session too. I want to turn to Margaret Alvine. And Margaret asked you to read a piece of your winning essay on the importance of freedom of religion.
The first sentence of the Bill of Rights reads, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." Perhaps the reason the freedom of religion is the first right in the Bill of Rights is because it was one of the first forces bringing people to the New World. Also, many of the founding fathers cared deeply about religion. Our nation has a strong and varied religious tradition with all kinds of believers. On its own, the First Amendment applies only to the federal government, not to the states. Many states already had established religions at the ratification of the First Amendment. Today, the 14th Amendment has been used to apply the Bill of Rights to the states. Even without actual established religions, there are many other things the Freedom of Religion Clause now addresses in state and local governments. Among these is the topic of religion as it pertains to public school. In 1962, the court found that prayer in public schools was unconstitutional. This idea that the government must remain neutral between religion and non-religion is fairly recent as our culture changes. Today, the struggle to keep our religious freedom rights continues. I live in California, where over the years there have been many attacks on religious freedoms. Last year, there was a bill that would have required priests to report certain things they heard in confession. The Catholic Church teaches, however, that a priest must never, never tell what he hears in confession. This is known as the seal of the confessional, and it is extremely serious if it's violated. Catholics and people of other religions all over California swung into action, writing letters to Sacramento. The bill was withdrawn and never voted on, to the relief of many religious groups in California.
Margaret, thank you. We love your passion in the essay, and it feels like you really care about this issue. Can you tell us, do you ever run into challenges or difficulties in your writing, and how do you get past some of those obstacles?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges for me is procrastination. So when one of his sons asked Justice Scalia if writing was easy, he said, no, it was really hard. So I guess I'm in good company if I don't find writing super easy, but I do enjoy it. So to overcome procrastination, I find that it really helps if I set deadlines for myself, because I don't find it too difficult to do, say, brainstorming and then writing an outline. But what I do find difficult is getting from that to the next step, because I'm kind of a perfectionist. So I think to myself, well, I won't be able to write a perfect essay right now, so I have to keep working on it. But then I'll never actually write it. So I have to set myself a deadline. I'll be done doing my outlining. And then I might turn on some music and write my first draft. And I definitely recommend you do brainstorm and have an outline, though, because that really helps avoid just having a blank page and not knowing what to write, because that's awful. I've done that too. And then the second challenge I really have is when I have written some, or maybe I'm still in the process of outlining, and I don't really like where I'm getting. I don't like my results. So I would say for that, don't be afraid to change directions if you don't think you can continue with what you're doing. For instance, for my essay for Constituting America last year, I started out to write on the 10th Amendment, but I wasn't really finding anything to write about. So I ended up switching to the First Amendment. And then don't be afraid to find someone you trust and say, my writing or my ideas don't sound right to me. Can you read it and give me your thoughts? And then lastly, just keep editing. I ended up turning my essay in just like an hour before the deadline because I kept editing it, and I probably drove some of the people I love nuts going, so I edited this. Do you think it sounds better now? But just go through on a word processor, make a new document, and just keep editing it until you like it better.
Those are some great tips and very inspirational for people who are watching. Let's go over to Magda now. Magda, I think you're going to share with us 2 minutes of your winning speech.
The First Amendment of the United States Constitution states elegantly and unequivocally, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right to people peaceably to assemble and petition their government for a redress of grievances. George Washington said, quote, if men are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter, which may involve the more serious and alarming consequences that can invite the consideration of mankind, reason is of no use to us. The freedom of speech may be taken away, and dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep, to the slaughter. As Washington understood, a free democratic society can only get to what is true, can only keep itself free, and can only prevent its collapse or its destruction if people who disagree with each other can discuss the most important matters honestly, honorably, and with nuance. Civil discourse between members of opposing political sides is the lifeblood of a thriving democracy. It is the golden thread weaving together a healthy civic culture. Further, it is the only way for citizens of a country to prevent a collapse of civic and social bonds, an end to trust in freedom and in democratic self-governance, a turn towards totalitarian ideologies, and ultimately a balkanization of society into competing groups, each more hateful and tribal than the next. Conversations across lines of disagreement are the best way, the only way, to create new knowledge in science, in politics, in philosophy, in literature, in art, in theology, and in ethics, because they allow us to counter our own confirmation biases. So let us speak to one another with honesty and nuance, with open minds and open hearts, with kindness and understanding. Let us protect the free speech of our friends by defending the free speech of our enemies. Let us, together, prevent our community, our society, and our country from becoming divided against itself and collapsing under the weight of tribalism and polarization. Through engaging in respectful civil conversations with people with whom we disagree, let us prevent the United States from being turned, the people of the United States from being turned against their brothers and sisters and balkanized into tribal enclaves, lest we become so entrenched in our own ideologies and so averse to anyone with different perspectives that we risk being led, as George Washington warned, like sheep to the slaughter.
Wow. Thank you, Magda. Your writing is so dynamic. We could tell why you're Ivy League, and you're also just a great speaker. I mean, we are just so proud to have you as our speech winner. Tell us, what is your process for writing an essay like your speech? And how do you come up with ideas or conduct your research? And do you have any tips for planning or writing an essay or a speech?
This one, I don't think I've told anyone about. This one is actually a funny story. I was sitting in the car outside of the dentist's office waiting for a dentist appointment. This was like the day before the deadline, and I had just come across that Constituting America exists and that this was a question, and it was something I was interested in. So in the like 40 minutes before the dentist appointment, I just sat in the car and wrote.
Wow.
So I don't think that's something that is generally what people do with writing essays. So that my advice is not have lots of dentist appointments and write everything before that. In general, I think my advice for being a good writer and having interesting and unique perspectives on topics is, as cliche as it is to say it, talk to people who you disagree with, listen to them, approach the world with learning and listening rather than like saying, I am right and this is why you should all believe that I am right, because you will learn more and you will be happier. For writing specifically, I would always advise reading a lot, especially if you're someone to whom reading doesn't come naturally and you don't really think of yourself as a reader, especially if you're someone who's interested in building things and doing physical stuff. or interested in more science and technology stuff, there will, I am sure, be books that you're interested in those subjects. And then that'll help you with all the skills that writing and reading entails.
Well, and that last piece of advice is so important. And one of the reasons why we loved your speech so much, because you talked about the importance of listening to people with viewpoints different than your own. And our next session actually is on civil civic conversation. So you're the perfect lead into that. Now, up next is Jacob Mott, Best High School Essay on Film. And Jacob is going to, I think we're going to show an excerpt from his winning work, The Humble Perspective of an American Citizen.
The fiery argument, which causes prevalent division between American citizens and their fellow citizens of the globe, as to when and what extent these constitutional edicts have crossed over from theory into practice, has been reignited once again. By consequence, more and more well-meaning people have found themselves pushed further and further to the opposite sides of the same collapsible snowy summit. Among others, there are those on this mountain who perceive the Constitution and its supposedly subservient government as being without flaw. There are also those who perceive the same objects of discussion as completely hollow and devoid of meaning. To embrace either philosophy, to risk total collapse of the people in both of those camps, and everyone in between. If America and her ruling document were perfect, I dare say there would be no need for this contest, as everyone would have already had a uniformed answer. America has its wretched qualities, and it has the record to prove. But in retrospect, surely there must be something more than that, something which causes the essence of a shining city upon a hill, whose beacon light guides freedom-loving people everywhere, as put by the late President Ronald Reagan over 3 decades ago. If not, then why do people still come here after 243 years? Plenty of people still decide to have their children and raise their families together here. And plenty of people are still working for and towards a truly more perfect union. So what is it that makes America so appealing? What is it about America and its ruling document that makes this country and its way of life so unique to others?
Well, thank you, Jacob. And, you know, you paint such a beautiful visual picture with your essay, The Snowy Summit. You've got a real gift with words. How long does it usually take you to write an essay? And also, you know, what is your favorite part in the writing process and why?
Well, as far as how long it takes me to write an essay, that really fluctuates on the subject. Something like this, where I wanted to refine each sentence and verb in order to convey the correct meaning, as one word can change an entire sentence or paragraph or essay, however large you want to go with that. This one in particular probably took me a few weeks, and some may find that ironic that it took me longer to get it right on film than to actually write it. And so that's where like the 55 takes came in. And as far as what my favorite part of writing would be, I would say pertaining to a lot of different sorts of writing, it would be the research not only of academic nature, but of empathetic and on boots on the ground. For instance, if I were to write something about politics, well, I've interned for different politicians. If I were to write something about international relations, I hope to join the Peace Corps and to serve in that capacity, so I'd be able to draw from experience there. Stuff like that.
Well, that's great. And we've only got about 15 seconds left, but is there anything you'd want to say about creating an outline when you go to write?
Yeah, don't beat yourself up over it not looking great the first time. And I would say if you have the time, give it a few hours to a day to sit, revisit it, and then see how you feel about it.
Awesome advice from all of our communications winners. And now to close out the workshop, we have a video clip from our best essay winner in 2019, Angela Zong. So stay tuned for tips about inspiration for writing, starting the process, and conducting thorough research.
What inspires me when I'm writing is the situations and circumstances that I have experienced, and as well as those of people who I do not know, because I believe that each individual is shaped by their surroundings. So all of us have unique stories to tell, and it's super important to convey not only your voice, but also the voice of others who cannot be heard at that moment. And so I like to incorporate all of those into writing. Additionally, I would highly recommend that people look into the values of people that they look up to, role models such as like Nelson Mandela, Malala, etc., and see why those values are so important to them, and then apply those to their writing to make the most meaningful and thoughtful essay that they can do. I believe that using these two tools will not only elevate your own voice, but also incorporate some of the underlying principles that each person stands for whenever they are doing writing their initial draft and developing their final essay. I have a couple of steps when we're conducting my research. So first, I like to do a sort of overview of the historical context that was taking place, if it's like a history paper. If it's more of something that is happening now, I still think that context, again, is super important into determining why people choose to take the actions that they do. And so familiarizing yourself with the background is a key first step. Because I think oftentimes people are not as portrayed as sympathetically as they should have been, given the context of their barriers to access and other challenges that they might have faced at the moment. So after I conduct initial research on their overall background, as well as like maybe familial background or the sort of environment that they were raised, I like to go into the step-by-step of the event that took place that I'm trying to cover, to make sure that I don't miss anything and can be as thorough as possible when presenting my research, no matter if it's a narrative essay or more of like a historical or academic paper. These are super important to make sure that you are able to highlight any nuances that have come up instead of glossing over them, as many people might do. And this also helps to see if there's any continuous themes throughout the actions that have been taken that you can relay in your message. So I hope that helped, and thank you so much.